All right, Dr. Axe, welcome to the Meat Mafia Podcast. We are pumped to have you on today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Harry. Brett, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. We were saying that this episode's been a long time coming. Obviously, we have a great mutual friend, Jordan Rubin, who we both know. So when we were visiting him, we got to meet you at dinner, which was incredible. And I was going to introduce you as the man, the myth, the legend, because I was reading through your bio prior to this, and I'm like, how do you even introduce this guy? Because you've done so many things. So I'm gonna take my best stab at this. So, doctor in chiropractic medicine, certified doctor of natural medicine, clinical nutritionist. You have a blog that's posted thousands of articles that have helped tons of people with all different maladies, myself included. You have a leadership degree from Johns Hopkins. You're the co-founder of Ancient Nutrition. You're the author of 6 best-selling books. And I'm sure there are even more things that I'm leaving out, but I'm sure that's probably pretty cool to hear that played back to you as well with everything that you've done the last decade or so.
It's great. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's definitely encouraging. I was one of those kids. I was just doing an interview before this, and I was the kid in high school who barely graduated. I had a C minus GPA, barely graduated, and I had a teacher tell me that she said, "What do you want to do?" Freshman English class. What do you want to do when you after high school? I said, I'd like to be a doctor. She laughed at me. She said, you can never do that with your grades. And so, anyways, it's I barely got into college. What I finally did, I actually had a moment where I had a teacher just encourage me and say, you know what, I think you're a great writer. You have a lot of potential. So I sort of grabbed onto that, and that's anyway, sort of ran with that. But all that being said, I appreciate the kind words, and I'm excited to talk today. Jordan has been raving about you guys and your podcast. I know you guys have had some incredible guests on. So again, I'm honored to be here and hope I can contribute.
Well, we've both benefited from all the content that you've put out there, as Brett said. So we've been equally as excited for this one. Um, Dr. Axe, I'm curious, what was that draw to being a doctor like for you? Was that just kind of you experimenting with your own health and seeing uh, like an interest there, or why do you think you were gravitating towards that initially as opposed to kind of the other things that you could have been doing at the time?
Yeah, for me, it was a health crisis in my family. My mom was diagnosed with cancer when I was in junior high. And it was shocking to my family because my mom was a fitness kind of expert. Like she taught swim lessons and fitness. And so when she was diagnosed with cancer, we went through the traditional conventional model, and she went and she lost all her hair. She went through chemotherapy. She had a mastectomy. And I remember as a kid thinking two things: one, I never want to see anyone have to go through this again, and number two, there has to be another way. And so that really led me to. And my mom was eventually diagnosed as cancer free, but was sicker than ever after going through the treatment. She was then diagnosed with chronic constipation. She had hypothyroidism. She got put on antidepressant and anti-anxiety drugs.
Hmm.
And part of my memory of my mom growing up was she just was so sick and tired all the time. She had chronic fatigue. And eventually, right before I was graduating to open up my functional medicine clinic, which I used to operate in Nashville, Tennessee, she called me and said, I've got bad news. I've been diagnosed with cancer again. And I flew home back to Ohio where I grew up. We sat down, prayed together, talked about it. And we just both felt really led to take care of her all naturally. And so her diet, what we consisted of was mostly, it was like meat and vegetables. I mean, that was mostly her diet. We did a few berries. We did, some coconut, things like that. But for the most part, it was mostly vegetables, some meat. Meat was mostly wild salmon and bone broth. And then we had her doing reishi mushroom, we had her doing turmeric, a lot of those supplements, and really also had a real mindset of healing. I think this is actually one of my biggest lessons over the past 20 or so years is that while food is medicine is powerful, mindset medicine is just powerful or more. And so really combining those two things with my mom, we had her start visualizing the cancer cells killing, being destroyed by her white blood cells. I had her start visualizing her bringing her grandkids to Disney World 25 years in the future. And she followed this program I laid out for her for 4 months, went back to her oncologist, and they did a CT scan, called us 2 days later, and they asked, before they even told us the results, they said, what have you been doing? We shared with them, and their exact words were, this is highly unusual. We don't typically see this, but your tumors have shrunk by more than half. They said, hey, keep doing what you're doing. We want to see you again, in the future. They saw her again 9 months later, complete remission. Today, my mom's in her mid 70s, in the best shape of her life, bringing her kids to Disney World, all the things she visualized in the past. And so that was really for me, Harry. I mean, that was the thing, is that seeing my mom go through that just sparked within me. I want to learn a different way, a more natural way that's not the conventional model to help people heal. And that, and going through that with my mom eventually caused me to start drax.com and then start Ancient Nutrition with Jordan and just pursue this whole career in health and wellness.
It's such a powerful story. It's always so amazing how you take this terrible curse and really turn it into the ultimate blessing, and everything that stemmed from that incredible experience that you and your mom had treating her with cancer. Dr. Axe, I'm curious maybe how some of those doctors responded to your mom's positive response from everything that you were doing. And the reason why I'm asking you that is prayer and mindset was huge for me when I was healing from ulcerative colitis. I actually learned that from you and Jordan. There's a great video on your channel where he talks about how to heal from Crohn's and UC. And so he gives the diet, he talks about bone broth, fermented foods, etc. But he talked about this general mindset of healing. And so when I was really inflamed, not only would I pray, I would actually meditate and almost imagine the ulcers like calming themselves out and imagining myself with a really calm gut. And so I did that for a few years. And then in 2021, I went to get a colonoscopy. I had zero inflammation, zero microinflammation, and I was the only patient and my G out of the thousands of patients that my GI worked with that he was allowed me to get off the biologic drugs that I was on. So I really took that approach that you were just talking about with your mom and had incredible results. But it was a little bit frustrating because when I healed, I said to my doctor, I was like, look, do you want me to give you the program that I've been on for a few years? And he really wasn't super interested in it. And I was very curious about that because I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm the only patient that's holistically healed from this, but you don't want the playbook of how I used what I used to get myself healthy. So I'm curious, did your mom's doctors react similarly to that? Were they interested in some of the protocols that you were using?
No.
Yeah,
I
no.
mean, this is a real short answer. The answer is no. There was really no interest. It was, they do what they do. Here's the thing I'll say about all of us, including physicians, is we all have our way of seeing things. Perception is really key. The three of us could all be in the same room. Somebody could come in and say something to all three of us, and it means something different to all of us. I mean, we all take it in and have a different sort of narrative that we create out of that. So all that being said, I think about a lot of medical doctors. I mean, it could be anyone, but I think a lot of the medical community today, imagine you had a lens that you were seeing the world through, and then you just put a red lens in, and you're like, what do you see? Well, everything's red. Everything's medicine. They don't see the supernatural. They don't see the spiritual. They don't see the 4,000 years of case studies of Chinese medicine and the patterns and principles that sort of work within the whole health community. I remember saying this with, well, I've honestly seen this so much, but as we were going through COVID, I remember thinking, why don't people see things the way that I do? Like, I struggle with this a little bit. I was like, you're telling, okay, there's a virus. Okay. I get that. But I did a seminar right early on, and I was a guest on a few podcasts, and I said, here's what I would do. I said, I would do high dose vitamin D. I would do zinc, high levels. I said I would do, and I was just sharing. This wasn't Josh Axe. This was traditional Chinese medicine.
Mhm.
You want to do a lot of chicken bone broth. You want to do ginger, onion, garlic, miso, like all these things that are immune boosters, elderberry, echinacea, galangal, all these things. And I actually had several news outlets. One news outlet kind of write a slam piece on me. A Christian actually magazine wrote a slam piece on me that I was unscientific.
Mm.
And it was so crazy to me. And then of course, and then also I talked about the side effects of staying indoors and not leaving your home, like the loneliness, the alcoholism, the drug abuse, the kids falling behind in learning. Like, I exposed a lot of this stuff early on. I mean, the mainstream media just, I got really ridiculed on it. And of course, now we're 3 years later. I'm not trying to say, I don't want to say everything I said was right, but I will say most of it, I think, was right or fairly in line with what we should have been doing. Yet, all that being said, the reality is that people in mainstream medicine today, they don't see what that we see. They don't see, and what wisdom is, in part, it's being able to see those patterns, not just seeing what a biased medical study that is funded by a pharmaceutical company is saying. It's being actually able to see those patterns throughout history of what works and what doesn't. I was at a panel It was either South by Southwest or Paleo FX. I think actually both were in Austin, but
Yeah.
it was back-to-back years. And I remember I was sitting on a panel with a if I mentioned his name, you're like, oh wow, that's a really well-known doctor in the medical, but also even the natural community. And somebody asked in the audience, they said, how do we know how to decide what is true today when there's all these different diets and ideas out there? And the way he answered is, well, the only way to know is just follow whatever the latest medical study tells you. Whatever it says, whatever it's putting out there, that's what you should follow. That's how to know the truth. And I just, I was the next on the panel and I just said, hey, I respect you. I'm really honored to be on this panel with you, but I couldn't disagree with you more. I think the way to know it is by knowing principles and in the way things work. And so I said, if somebody has immune deficiency, just saying the latest drug, whatever the research shows is the best way to treat it. I said, there are thousands of years of Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, biblical medicine, Greek medicine, Hippocrates, all of these things that actually have shown us the patterns. Like, we know that beets build blood. I don't need a study to tell me that. I know that foods that are light yellow, like ginger and garlic and onion, activate your white blood cells that actually have a lot of anti-pathogenic properties. Sorry, I could go on and on. I've spoken a long time now, but my point is, going back to, most doctors don't know what to do, and they won't even embrace it because they only memorize things. They only memorize ideologies. They actually don't know how to think for themselves. In school, they memorize facts and know how to repeat and recommend what a medical study says. They actually don't know how to think for themselves.
Mm. It's the observation of the current medical system. Like, anyone who has any critique against the pharmaceutical industry or conventional science is anti-science, has now become an accepted, that's an accepted thought from a lot of people. Whereas you're saying there's thousands and thousands of years of scientific data, observational data that we can collect information from and apply in ways that have been applied for decades. I mean, that's actual science.
That's right. That's right. Well, and here's something that's really interesting that a lot of people, I don't think, fully understand. Like, you guys probably remember this. Dr. Fauci said, "I am the science," when they questioned him.
Yes.
And then he recently came out with this video. There's a video where he's being interviewed, and they're walking by this church. It's actually a Catholic church, and he said, "Yeah, I was married in there." And they said, "Hey, are you still Catholic? Do you still attend, go to the church?" And he said, "No, I don't attend. I don't follow it." And they said, "Well, why?" He said, "Well, I believe my own morals and ethics, are good enough." And it's interesting. The reason I bring this up, and because this is important, most people that say I'm all about the science don't understand this. Science cannot hold itself up. Science has to live on a bed of ethics. But here's what I mean. There are so many. There is actually a bigger study, and I wish I could quote it. I'm going to look it up after this because I think it's so important. But there is a study that found that the majority of scientific research put out there today is biased. Now, most of us know that, but most people don't fully embrace that or actually truly believe it, or they would probably act differently. But if you have somebody who's conducting a medical study, and when you're conducting a medical study, scientifically, you should say, I have no preconceived things of what I want to do. Like, I'm going to do everything I can to just let the data tell me what the truth is. And so real science is built on ethics, because if you change anything, even a little bit, it loses integrity, and it's built on a lie. And so most of these studies that are created by pharmaceutical companies or have people like Fauci or other people involved, they wanted to say something. And so they're manipulating and doing things to push it in one direction. So really, even science needs religion and morality and ethics in order to be true.
Yeah, and regardless of whether you say you're an atheist or not, you do believe in something, whether it's God or something else. There is some higher power that's pulling you, whether you realize it or not. But you actually made me, I was going to bring this up to you, Dr. Axe. It seems like there's actually, with all the darkness that COVID bred, there's actually this, it almost seems like there's this incredible revolution that's going on the last 2 to 3 years of people that are refining their Christian faith. They're experimenting with alternative diets, whether it's carnivore, paleo, keto. They're finding local ranchers to connect with. They're homesteading, they're homeschooling their kids. What do you think it is between the correlation between, faith, nutrition, spirituality, et cetera? How would you kind of explain this new revolution that's going on? Because it gives Harry and I a lot of faith that we can kind of win this battle that's going on right now. But I feel like you have an amazing perspective on this.
Yeah, when we were in the middle of COVID, we had this well-known pastor. He was at my house, and he's really wise. I love this guy. And I he said, "Hey, what are your thoughts?" Like we started talking about COVID a little bit. And he said, "You know what?" He said, because there's a lot of people discouraged about just so many people just giving up their freedoms immediately. And so we were talking about that. And he said, "You know what? I had to change my mind on this." He said, "What I started realizing is that what a blessing it is to be in a time of tribulation." The fact that he said, because you never get to truly reveal your own leadership and character until times of crisis. He said, crisis reveals character. And so that was one thing for me as I started having more of a grateful mindset of saying, I'm so grateful I get to go through tribulations, that I get to be one of those shining stars in a dark world. I get to be that city on a hill. I get to be that lamp that's lit in the dark and help set others on fire, inspire others. And so all that being said, I think that's an important mindset. I think a lot of times people worry more about being canceled than they do, instead of realizing, no, you can be the next Abraham Lincoln. No, you can be the next Martin Luther King Jr. You can be that next person who went through a time of major trial, and you stood out and stood for what was right when most people didn't. So all that being said, I think the big thing though is people started thinking. I think when you are really pressed and put in a difficult situation in life, I think that people started. Revealing their true character. Is one of the things that happened. Now, when it comes to people finding their faith and people turning to God and people also discovering sort of new ways of new diets and those sort of things, I think that people are wired to try and find the best life possible. I think most of us want to get to the end of our lives and say, I ran to win the race. I did everything I could to live the best life possible. And so I think those really sort of unique individuals that get pressed, I think that they start to say to themselves, I want to have the best life possible. Just give you an example with some few people you guys are aware of in this. We saw a lot of free thinkers, is what I would call them. Jordan Peterson probably leading the pack, along with Joe Rogan, Russell Brand, Elon Musk. I think these people all kind of follow in that similar category, to where politically they actually generally, especially before COVID, were all probably seen as being either actually slightly left or maybe just neutral. And those people started waking up and realizing, whoa, this is not good for humanity. Like this is not a good thing. So I think one of the things that all of this did was it sort of woke people up to the truth. And by the way, I know that I'm saying a lot of things, but I think basically it's this. I think that everyone was really comfortable. And then when you're in a time of war, which is a culture war, that you almost have to pick a side, or you have to wake up and you have to think for yourself. I think people start realizing, okay, this is a big deal. Like, here's an example, like for me, like I have to choose to do something with my children. Like Joe Rogan moved from California to Austin. Elon Musk, again, moved from California to Austin. Everyone in the state of California moved from California to either Austin or Nashville or Florida. Okay. So, and they all did this because they started saying, most of them, you asked them why, they said, I want a better life for my kids. Okay. A lot of them said this. And so they started saying, okay, do I want my kids in a place or a state where they have to wear a mask, which is actually not good for their health? It's bad, actually, mental health. It's terrible. And there's all of these crazy laws, and we're actually enabling homelessness and a number of things. Or do I want to go to a place where I have freedom? And so, all that being said, I think a lot of people are waking up to these things because they've been forced to think. I think a lot of people have been stuck in social media, watching TV, just sort of absorbing things. But I think they sort of woke up to realize, you know what, this is not good for me and for my family.
Yeah, I really like what you were saying there about people really probably being tested in a way that they hadn't been tested before during COVID. And I think it brought out a whole new generation of leaders. Obviously, I think a lot of people were really, really negatively affected from it, kids in particular, but a lot of people lost jobs, and there was plenty of negative ramifications of COVID. But I did see the same thing that you did, which is there's people now operating with a new level of authority. It feels like, where
Right.
they're
That's
more
right.
confident in themselves as leaders. Even people like Dana White, like confidently saying, you know, you can't own me if you sponsor the UFC. Like you don't own me.
Yeah.
I don't want to work with you. That wasn't something that people were saying 5 years ago. So I think it's a powerful indictment of the direction that things are going. And it does give me confidence, even though we are kind of still operating in this new space. Um, Dr. Ox, I'm curious, what do you think like the direction of medicine looks like in general from here forward? Like, what's the future hold? And the reason I asked the question, just some
Mhm.
context, is like I see a lot of people moving towards the functional side of the equation, people looking for more like more natural ways of curing illnesses. I've noticed that like home birthing is now like becoming more of a trend, it seems
Yeah.
like, and people just looking for alternative ways of medicine, just in general. So I'm curious, like, what do you see happening here the next decade or so with the direction of health in the US?
Yeah, I'd love to answer this. I do want to jump back to the last question because a few other things came to mind, just two other things I think they're important. One, I think through COVID, I don't think people realized that the system was broken. Like it
Hmm.
broke. A lot of things just broke. And so is this sort of that, well, don't fix it until it's broken. Well, it broke. And so I think a lot of people realize that. I also think people got a little bit more time to themselves, working from home, more time to think. I think most people's lives are so unbelievably busy that they don't have time to reflect and think. I think that's as part of also what caused a spiritual awakening. I think people started realizing and feeling empty, feeling empty. I think there's just a void for a lot of people feeling like I'm not living the most meaningful life possible. Like there's something missing in my life. And even though I've accumulated all these things, we got all, we've got a great car, a great home. I got a great job. Heck, I can work from home now. Like there's still an emptiness there. And I think people started maybe waking up more and realizing that I need more. And one is I need people like the missing of actual human connection, I think left such a void that people realized that I, even though I'm connected to people, I wasn't as connected as I want to be. And I need to be more connected to something. And I think that also led them to God. So I wanted to mention that there as well. I think that was part of that sort of spiritual awakening we saw with so many people, whether again, a Russell Brand or a lot of other people. Hulk Hogan, I just saw, was baptized here this past week. And I used to love watching him growing up. And in terms of healthcare in the future, um, it's so crazy. When I started my clinic, this was about 15 years ago, and I operated it for about 6 years or so. But if I was doing a lecture, so I think this is going to probably blow your mind. It blows my mind when I think about it. I would sometimes ask. I remember one of my first workshops. I asked people to raise their hand if they've heard of what omega-3 fats were. Hardly any had heard about it. That was 15 years. That wasn't even that long ago. And then a couple years later, every single person had heard and started knowing what they were. Just things like that. It's like we have gone so far here. I mean, most people 15 years ago, if they would have heard of the way of eating, I mean, the eating the natural way that we're promoting and some of the other red light therapy and cold plunging and everything else, it was like, that's fringe science. That's not even science. That's just something crazy people do. Now it's become more mainstream. And so all that being said, we have come so far in such a short period of time. What I think we're going to see more of in the future is I think we're really going to see companies leverage AI. And I think in the future, we will be able to, if you've seen those levels patches, the blood
Mhm.
glucose monitors, you got those on your arm. I'm an investor in a company called Aura Ring, and I love this ring because it tracks my sleep. I think eventually we're going to be able to, by just having that little kind of needle in your arm that you don't even feel, right, with those glucose monitors. I think it's going to be able to get enough blood to where you'll be able to basically pull up your phone and see every vitamin and mineral you're deficient in on your phone. I mean, you'll see everything you're deficient in. You'll be able to see in real time how your body's reacting to a certain food to see if you're having a sensitivity to it in real time. So I actually think in the future we're going to be able to kind of see something to where, I mean, literally it's like a dashboard constantly you're able to see of what's going on internally within your system all the time, 24 hours a day. And I think based on those things, I think the future is personalized nutrition and personalized medicine. I remember when I first got out into practice, I started very early on. I thought there's probably maybe one ideal diet for most people. Well, as I started studying in-depth Chinese medicine and Ayurveda and all these forms of medicine, I realized really quickly also as I got in and started taking care of patients, there's absolutely not one diet. In fact, every diet should be different for every person to a degree. I mean, we've got 7 billion people on the planet, and everybody is an absolute unique individual, and a perfect diet is a little bit different for every single one of those 7 billion people. That might seem crazy, but I think that's the reality. And so, if I had somebody, I mean, Brett, you'll get this. It's like when I was coming out 15 years ago, the big thing was raw diets.
Mm.
If I would put a patient with inflammatory bowel disease on a raw diet and have them eat raw broccoli, I'm sending them to their deathbed almost. I mean, it's the worst thing you can do. That's just a prime example. But somebody with maybe a certain form of cancer or liver cirrhosis or gallbladder disease, okay, they can get some more raw. They maybe need to do a little bit higher vegetables. So that's the reality. But I think that's the truth. When I have studied Chinese and personalized medicine, it's, here's the idea with, you guys may know this, but just for everybody, the idea with Chinese medicine is your body, you want to change the environment. That's the goal. If you change the environment, the body heals itself. Okay. So your body tends to be either too hot internally or too cold. By the way, why do we call it a cold today? Well, it goes back to Greek medicine thousands of years ago because your body was too cold internally. So what are all the remedies to cure a cold? Well, they tend to be things that are warming. Ginger, drinking a warm bowl of soup. Even if you live in Nashville like I do, a hot toddy, because whiskey is the hottest of all liqueurs. You'll feel a warmth in your system. So you're too hot or too cold. Now, okay, how do you do that? Well, it's celery, it's cucumber. There are bitter herbs. Those drive out that. So that's a way. Or the other thing in Chinese medicine is your body is too dry or too damp. A lot of women going through menopause tend to struggle with the dryness. That dryness also can cause, sexual issues. It can cause weak bones, dry skin, a number of things. And so you need to moisten the body with things like coconut and a lot of those more moistening foods, bananas. But most people struggle more with dampness, which is candida. You'll see that it's mucus or yeast growth in the body. And so there are foods that help combat that. That tends to be actually a lot of foods as well that tend to be more bitter in nature, that drive out that dampness, and a lot of those warming foods as well, like soups. And then you have the other thing is too much movement called wind. That's when a pathogen enters your body and creates some issues. Could be loose stool constantly. That'd be an example of that. Or could be stagnation where things aren't moving through your body. An example that would be constipation, right? And that's where you have like IBS-D versus IBS-C, right? If we're talking about IBD and IBS. And then the other part there is that in Chinese medicine, there's two other things, is qi. Qi is your body's ATP in Western medicine. It's how much energy, how full is your battery? If you look at your phone right now, what's your battery? Let's say it's 70%. Okay, you're gonna be doing okay there. We want it to get it to 90% or so, but 70 is not bad. But what if you're at 40%? Well, now your vital organs, your body just does not have the energy. You're gonna be tired all the time. Certain organs aren't gonna be getting what they need. And the last thing in Chinese medicine is the health of your blood. So keeping your blood healthy, because that's bringing nutrients to your whole body. But really, it's those 8 things. And so in Chinese medicine, what they do is they say, okay, where are you imbalanced? We're going to use food as medicine to change the environment. And so with somebody with IBS-D, we're going to give you a lot of soups, a lot of meat, a lot of cooked vegetables, a lot of these certain herbs like ginger, and we're going to change the environment. Boom, now it's just your body heals itself because your body's always healing. Like if I have a cut on my hand and let's say I cut my hand, I've got a cut there. Well, it's going to heal unless you keep exposing it to the wrong environment, bad bacteria, things like that, versus if you cover it, keep it healthy, it'll heal itself. So that's sort of I know you asked me about, okay, so the future of medicine. So I do think the future of medicine, though, is very much going to be, I think eventually in hospitals, you'll have infrared saunas. I think you're going to have vitamin IVs. I think you're going to have dietitians that know what the heck they're doing, because now I'm not trying to be mean either. I'm just saying you go to a dietitian and you're getting Jello and skim milk. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. So I think we're going to see that in the future, hospitals full of regenerative and functional medicine.
It's an amazing answer. There's so much to unpack with that. I just get this I think we both just get this overwhelming sense with you, Dr. Axe, that you encompass so many different disciplines, whether it's like this intuitiveness of, okay, I'm going to learn what makes my body feel really good and be the CEO of my own health. You've got the Chinese medicinal background. You understand Western medicine. You also understand wearables. You mentioned you're invested in Aura Ring and Levels. We've used both of those devices, have had a ton of success with it. My question reminds me of a panel that we actually did a few weeks ago. We did this health summit. And so it was all about pioneering new trends in health. So we had on Lat Mansour, who's the research lead at HVMN. So the Ketone IQ, which is exogenous ketones, and then Wyatt Ewing, who's the founder of Ice Barrel. So both incredibly interesting people with very different perspectives, where Wyatt was totally in the intuitive camp, where he was like, look, I can't give you the science behind ice barrels. I just know that they make me feel really good. And if something makes you feel really good, you should keep doing it. And Lat had a more nuanced take. He's got 3 PhDs. So I thought he was going to be all about the data. And his thought process around data and wearables is that when you're metabolically unhealthy, you have no internal sense of what makes you feel good. So a wearable or a data or some type of a study can be super effective as long as it's accurate, because it kind of gives you this like guiding pillar to follow until you build up that metabolic health and develop that intuition. So I'm just curious for you, what do you think is that balance between developing intuition, leveraging data, leveraging wearables? I know it's kind of a loaded question, but I'd love to get your perspective on that.
No, it's an excellent question. Mark Sisson and I were actually just discussing something similar to this 2 weeks ago. And so here's what I would say. When I think about, I'm going to use spirituality here for a minute, just as an example. When I think about the spiritual greats, the people that have had some of the biggest impacts on the world, a lot of them we'll term them as mystics. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And they have a spiritual awareness. There's a real keen sense of things. And so when I'm around people that are really spiritually strong and mature, have you ever been? You guys have been around people like that? They have a really calm spirit.
Definitely.
You know, I mean, sometimes it's not to say they're not sometimes animated and passionate people, but generally in times of trial, they've got a sort of like this sort of spiritual wisdom and understanding and a calm spirit in most cases. And so, but there's a level of sort of, it's awareness, and this is really tied to emotional intelligence, but they have awareness. They're aware of themselves. It's self-distancing. And so this is how somebody could walk into a room with me right now. And if I have a high level of spiritual awareness or versus a low level, let's say I have a low level, and somebody says, Dr. X, you're a terrible person, and says some other mean things. If I have a low sense of self-understanding and worth, I'm going to then go boom and attack them right back. If I'm living in a state of really high spiritual awareness of understanding sort of, who God is, who I am, a number of things, my mind instead is going to go, I'm aware of who I am. And I'm made in the image of God. I'm called with a plan and a purpose. I'm called to love people, love God, and make earth a heavenly place. I know who I am. It kind of, Dr. X, you're a terrible person. Is like my mind actually realizes I'm not. My awareness then goes to the other person and says, that person's hurting. What is the most loving thing I can do for this person right now to bring them closer to God? So I bring all that up and bring this back to health to say this. I think that the best place to be is in a high level of physiological awareness of your body, mind, and spirit. And I feel like I've been able to and really been blessed to be able to develop that over the years. Like I'm really in tune with my body, really in tune. Like I know just like, okay, a cold's coming on before most people, they're typically a day or two. Like I know, same thing, musculoskeletal stuff, something's not right. Like I just know. I think a lot of people don't have that. So I would say the goal is to not need the blood work. The goal is to be in a place to where, or not even need the wearable. Like Aura Ring now, I know. I mean, I could wake up and I know what my score is going to be for the most part. I'm actually probably, and I hate to say this, Aura Ring is incredibly accurate, I think, but it's actually not perfect. And so I do think over time, I'm able to actually better to tell, even sometimes a point, I'm like, it says my sleep stat, but it's actually probably a little bit lower because anyways, all that being said, so what I like to do is I like to use data to help me learn and understand spiritual things. I think the Bible's the same way. When you think about the Bible, the Christian message is you have the Bible, which is the word of God, but you also have the Holy Spirit. And so I think using the Bible to be able to actually recognize God's voice. Now, I don't hear God's voice audibly, but I do hear it like my own conscience. And I have a conscience who's saying, peace, be still. hey, love that person, do this. I feel like that's the voice of God versus something else is like attack them back, this sort of like emotional drive to survive and fend for myself. That's probably not that voice. My point is I actually think for myself, I learned how to discern the voice of God, that spiritual awareness from actually reading the Bible. So my point is, I think it's great to have both. You should be reading the Bible and developing a spiritual awareness, or at least I'm sharing that that's what I do. I think a similar thing. I think these wearables and trackables have a lot of value in helping us better track and actually become more aware of our own physiology. By the way, I don't know if that's the best example, but I do think that the goal is to become incredibly aware of your own body, mind, and spirit. And I do think, listen, we can't figure out everything on ourselves. Like I'll give you an example. When I was wearing those the blood glucose monitor, the levels, I there were certain things I just couldn't quite tell. Well, actually I could tell, but it made me realize, you know what? You should have been more awake and realize this. If I have more than one piece of fruit, boom, my blood sugar just goes so high. I was kind of blown away by that. Like I actually found maybe even less. Sometimes like a half a cup of berries, my body was like, okay, hey, you're good. It's almost like nothing happened. But boom, if I would have a full cup or more, it was like blood sugar. But like it took I did realize I was a little bit tired and sleepy if I had a little bit more fruit, but the wearable actually really revealed that to me and really, really demonstrated this is the reality of what's going on. It helped me confirm what I'd been feeling.
Mm.
I really like what you're talking about just in terms of understanding your own body and building that intuition. And one of the observations you made was that a lot of people don't necessarily have that. And I've noticed that as well, where, you know, there's been certain moments in my life where I was really just trying to like either train for a sport and was developing new understanding of like how to put on muscle, how to develop a new movement pattern. And then that kind of evolved into learning a little bit more about nutrition and understanding how my performance was linked to food. And so there's all these avenues into learning more about your body that I think a lot of people miss out on if you don't really start to do these experiments and start to tinker a little bit with your own body. And my question is really like, how have you gone about just building up that intuition? You know, there's so many ways to do it, but I think it's so important for people to actually realize that you can experiment and you do have the freedom and you don't need some authority to kind of like tell you what you should and shouldn't be doing. I think there's a healthy amount of self-experimentation that can build this
Yeah.
trust within your own body.
Yeah, I think just a couple things. By the way, I learned to do this a little earlier in life because this is really early on. But I was a personal trainer and got into not professional by any means, but just doing just general healthy bodybuilding. You know, eating 6 meals a day, egg whites, all this stuff. But I the person who was coaching me taught me how to really lift. My dad did, but then in college and beyond. And so when I was lifting weights, for instance, if you're like doing a bicep curl, most of the time people just go in there and curl. Versus no, I'm going to do slow reps and I'm going to imagine trying to flex my body, get as big as I can while I'm doing a curl. My point with that is I think you can do it with exercise. I think there's a way of kind of being really aware of your body and trying to lengthen things and shorten things and pump things. And so I think there's a way to do that with exercise. I think with nutrition, the thing that I've really tried to do is just be really conscious of how is this meal affecting me? How do I feel right after? How do I feel a couple hours later? Like I knew that I was allergic to or sensitive to dairy pretty early on in life because every time I had dairy, my nose would run. And even if it was goat's milk, my nose would run. And so for me, dairy just my nose would just kind of get a little watery and then it would go away. But I realized that. And so for me, and I mentioned the fruit earlier, I realized that, okay, if I do just a little bit of fruit, I'm totally good. But if I do too much, same thing. Like I try to do higher levels of coconut milk. And I realized, man, that's just not sitting well with me if I do a whole, and this was canned. So it was really, really potent. So that's too much for me. So I just really try and kind of see what makes me feel the best post, an hour or two post eating. And I know that's really simple, but those are two things I think that are really practical that nearly anyone can do.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great answer. Dr. Axe, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about Chinese medicine. And the reason why I'm asking you about this, I since I initially got diagnosed with UC in 2016, I haven't had any major flare-ups by God's grace, but I've had too many flare-ups. And I know for me, there's some type of stress component to it that definitely plays a role in maybe getting those mini flare-ups. So I had one last summer, and then my buddy who we've actually had on the show, he's a podiatrist that's also a nutritionist too, and had Crohn's that he treated holistically. And so when I was in my flare-up, he actually recommended I think it was Qing Dai by Treasure of the East. I think that was the company that made it. And so that I
Yeah.
took it for 3 days and my bleeding stopped. It worked incredibly well. And then when I got another flare up, I did it again. It stopped the bleeding within like 2 to 3 days. So I never just blanket recommend anyone, but people will always ask me about, protocols when they're in a flare up. And I just say, look, this is what I took. I had great success with it. Are there
Yeah.
any other herbs that stick out to you that are almost like these miracle herbs that almost no one in the West knows about, but you're like, damn, I wish this stuff was more mainstream because it works so incredibly well with patients?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I do want to mention something that we don't do. Western nutrition companies rarely do that. Now, Jordan Rubin and I really try and do this with ancient nutrition with our formulas, but most companies, they just don't do this. And it's know how to blend herbs together. I want to get into the individual herbs, but I just want to say this. Like if you have um, a man with erectile dysfunction, okay, or low testosterone. In Chinese medicine, what they'll do is they'll say, okay, we're going to give you an herb to build your blood. Okay. Maybe it's Dan Shen or it could be Don. It's usually not Don Quai, but it could be something else, something to kind of build your blood. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do another herb that helps drive the blood towards your reproductive organs. Okay. And then we're going to give you something to boost the chi. So we're going to give you something to boost your chi, which is basically your energy. We're going to give you something to boost your yang, which is your testosterone. And we're
Mm.
going to do something to kind of send blood to the area. So they know how to combine herbs together to maximize the support in that individual area. So you'll almost never see, by the way, in Chinese medicine, them prescribe individual herbs. Now, sometimes they do. So I don't want to say they never do it, but it's actually less common. They tend to say, we're going to blend a few different herbs together in, for treating a specific condition. One of the biggest let me go through the top 5 herbs prescribed in Chinese medicine that most people just don't use here as an example. Number 1, astragalus. Astragalus, I actually recommend to a lot of patients with autoimmune disease. It helps. It's an adaptogen that helps balance the immune system and the digestive system. It's known to be the number 1 herb for something called spleen qi deficiency, which is basically a weak digestive system. If your digestive system, especially if you're kind of like just stomach grumbling and you know that your system is weak, that herb is amazing. I mean, it also has anti-cancer benefits, all kinds of things, but that's number 1. Number 2 is an herb that's typically used with women, and it's dong quai. So dong quai is known as female ginseng, but it's a blood builder. So many women have a blood deficiency and they don't know it, which is basically so we've heard of osteoporosis. Well, the weak form of osteoporosis before you get to osteoporosis is osteopenia. Okay. Well, a lot of women today don't have full-blown anemia, but they do have borderline anemia, which is a blood deficiency. And so dong quai, especially if a woman is bleeds a little heavier than most, or they just feel just a little weak, like they're not strong and vigorous. Man, dong quai for a lot of those women is an absolute game changer. It really helps build blood and balance hormones. So that would be a big one for a lot of women. I would also say, gosh, there's a gazillion. I mean, I think mushrooms as a category, it's actually gotten a lot more popular in recent years. But reishi mushroom is one that you can take long term. Some adaptogen, we've all heard of adaptogens. Some adaptogens you can take for a long time. Some you only want to do for a short time. For instance, ginseng is the most popular, one of the top 5 most popular herbs in Chinese medicine. But it's used for short term. It's the number 1 thing to fix adrenal thyroid, faster than anything.
Well,
But you don't want to be on it long term. You want to be on it maybe 3 months or even 1 month. Now, if a man gets to be over 60, they can actually take it longer. But for short, young, vigorous guys like yourself, like we wouldn't want to take it constantly all the time. But if you're really sick or have thyroid adrenal issues or low testosterone, boom, Panax ginseng there it's actually the most powerful Chinese herb by far.
Wow.
Generally speaking, and a lot of people aren't fully aware of that one. There are other, I mean, that's a few. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot. If you give me a condition to be easier, like, oh, this is the one for this condition. But I would say those are three that people definitely should be using more of.
Hmm. What are the properties of these herbs that actually make them medicinal in this way? Like, is it
Yeah.
affect the gut? Like, I'm just
Yeah.
curious how they're actually working in improving people's health so specifically. It's so interesting.
Yeah. So, a similar principle to acupuncture. A lot of people don't know how acupuncture work. I didn't for many years, and now I do. And basically, it's moving energy throughout the body. Okay, you're moving it to a different area. Sometimes it's stuck, and it's just simply not moving in an area. And I think some people may still have a feeling of like, oh, energy. That's not. Listen, your entire body runs on electric. What your brain is sending electrical signals down your spinal cord, out your nerves for your organs to work. Like, so to say the word energy, okay, I can start saying electricity. Like your body is communicating through electricity and through basically activating electricity, activating other things to like hormones or even ATP. It's really electricity. It's energy in the cell. So all that being said, I just wanted to throw that as a preference because sometimes when I use the word energy, people don't fully understand what that means. But oftentimes in Chinese medicine, herbs will either have some energy within them, or they will help change where energy goes, or help build up a certain area. You know, most herbs have the property of its environment. So, for instance, ginseng or ashwagandha or a lot of these roots, a lot of these grow like, you know, in like Siberia, like in the mountains. They're very like most adaptogens are very hardy. Like they grow in the ground and they're incredibly resilient. Okay. And so what you're doing is you tend to embrace the property, the essence of the plant that you're consuming. A similar thing would be seen in flowers. Lavender, here's an example, really easy one. Lavender is it attracts bees, right? Or a lot of flowers do, they're attractive. So what, like women have used flower, like flower essential oils, like perfume to attract men for thousands of years, right? It has an attractive property. It also is very yin, so it has a very calming property. Flowers, that's their property. They're calming, they're beautiful for the spirit. So when you're consuming a plant, you're actually absorbing the essence of that thing, and that's impacting your body with its essence. So if to give you an example with some of the ones I just talked about there, astragalus, it's adaptogenic. So when it goes into your body, what it's going to do is basically it's going to send signals to bring balance. It's going to bring balance to the immune system. It's also going to bring balance to the digestive system. If we have something like ginseng, now ginseng's not as much about balance. Ginseng is more about dry. I mean, it's like, you know, we watched the Mario Brothers movie recently, which I absolutely love because we love Chris Pratt. You know, Mario, if you ever play Mario, like you get a mushroom and you're like powered up. It's ginseng. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, you are boom, giving your body a burst, but your body likes to be eased into things, not typically, it doesn't like too much. So doing too much ginseng would be like doing too much caffeine. It'd be too much for your body because it's the strongest herb there is, period, almost. A deer antler is probably pretty high up there too for testosterone. And by the way, this is getting into details, but you're absorbing the essence of things. Deer antler, I just mentioned that. Well, that's something men take, not women. Like think about the tip of an antler. It's the tip of the deer antler they shave off, and that helps with testosterone. And there's studies that show this. Well, it's very similar to an erection, right? I mean, it's the very tip. It's you get it from a really big buck deer, really, really high in testosterone. So you're absorbing the essence of that animal in that way. So, anyways, I could go on and on about this, but that might have been what you're asking. You might have been asking something a little
Totally.
differently, but that's kind of the idea behind it.
This,
Well, I was,
oh, go
oh,
ahead.
yeah, I was just going to ask it. I asked that question because I think there's another interesting question here, which is that a lot of people kind of scoff at this as potentially woo-woo, but like the fact that eating animal liver actually helps you or has some properties that intuitively help you repair and have healthy liver function for yourself. And I'm curious if that's something that you've looked into at all and have any sort of research to back that up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's hit on the Western perspective, then we can hit on the Eastern perspective. So, from the Western perspective, if you're asking, I don't have a double-blind placebo off the top of my head. I do have, though, examples of things liver needs for phase 1 and phase 2 liver pathway detoxification. But your liver does so much. People tend to think of the liver as just detoxification. No, your liver moves your blood through your body. No, your liver gets rid of and balances hormones via, getting rid of xeno and phytoestrogens and a number of things. So your liver is probably your body's most active, important organ outside of your brain. So, in order for your liver to function optimally, it needs a lot of B vitamins. I think science shows that. There are studies that show that, liver has 10 times the amount of B12 as a steak. So it's very, very high in B vitamins. It's also very high in iron. So this is also why a lot of people in Chinese medicine, it actually was taken just as much as a blood builder. So oftentimes it was taken for that reason as well. But yeah, the Western perspective, I think if you just did a breakdown of the nutritional profile and the nutrients, you're going to see, another example would be heart, right? Heart is really high in coenzyme Q10. There are lots of studies that show that coenzyme Q10 helps naturally lower cholesterol, reduces the risk of heart attack, and lower blood pressure. I mean, overall, coenzyme Q10, there's a lot of great studies on this. Well, we can simply go and correlate and say, well, how many milligrams of coenzyme Q10 are in heart? So we know if we extrapolate it that way clinically that coenzyme Q10, heart is good for your heart, right? But the Chinese principle, if we switch over to Eastern medicine, it's called like supports like. Okay. Now this principle is it's of course exactly very true for eating organ meats. It's also true for eating foods that look like organs, right? Like, what are the best foods for the brain? Think about a walnut. You crack it open, it looks like the exact hemisphere of your brain. I mean, we know it's high in omega-3s and choline and vitamin E and everything your brain needs. Beets, it looks like blood. When you cut it open, it's like beets have nitric oxide, which help fuel your blood. Celery looks like your bones. Celery is the most alkalizing probably of all the vegetables and actually helps build bone health. So, and I could go through another 10 or 20 of these, but all that being said, the very similar principles we talk about these organ meats, liver is fantastic for your liver. There's always, it's interesting, the most common comment I get, and it's an understandable comment with liver, well, isn't liver the detoxifier of the body? Yeah, it is the detoxifier of the body. It's not the storer of toxins. It acts as a filter to get rid of certain things, but it's not the storer. I mean, it's you want to know the storer of toxins, it's more of your fat cells. That's what stores toxins more than your organs do not store toxins. Your fat does. That's why having excess body fat is such an issue, or eating bad fat of animals is such an issue, right? Because of what's stored there. So all that being said, yeah, I mean, liver is an unbelievable food. I mean, if somebody were to ask me what's the most healing food on the planet for most people, the answer is liver. I mean, it's probably my number one superfood. I mean, I got bone broth up there too, and probably some other glandulars. But I mean, if you would have walked into an ancient, they called them apothecaries. It was an ancient pharmacy back, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Here's what you'd find in there. You'd find herbs, mushrooms, and glands and organs that are dried. That's what you'd find. That's what the best physicians throughout history used as medicine is herbs, mushrooms, and and organs for the most part. So I'm a huge believer in the benefits of organ meats.
It's funny when you describe the walnut being the exact same shape as a brain. It just makes me think about eating God foods versus nature foods, and how if you're spiritual and have faith, this intuitively makes so much sense. How, God's the ultimate food scientist. So he's like, yeah, dummy, I'm going to eat food. I'm going to make these certain foods that are shaped like different parts of your body that will support those unique characteristics and properties too. It seems like that intuitively makes so much sense.
Exactly. I think we have complicated things so much in conventional Western culture when it comes to nutrition. we talked about that lens earlier. We're looking at things through a certain lens via like a microscope, which is the way we do everything today. It's very Greek in nature versus no, before you do that, you just have to see the big picture. Like the color of foods will tell you a lot. Red foods build your blood. Green foods help cleanse and support liver and gallbladder. Yellow foods support and activate the immune system. So it's just, and it keep going. Blue foods and dark purple foods are good for reproductive health, especially the adrenals. So it's so yeah, if people just stood back, looked at nature, what foods look like, and also their flavors. This is the way Chinese medicine breaks things down. It's, well, what does bitter do? Bitter activates the liver and gallbladder to release bile for detoxification, but it also dries up too much mucus and phlegm and things like that in the body. And then sour, that activates the liver actually even more for detoxification. It's known as a liver tonifier. Sweet, not real sweet, but like sweet potato sweet or cinnamon sweet. That's really nourishing to the upper digestive system. Anyway, but it's, flavors, colors, and the appearance of food. Those three things tended to be how, ancient Chinese practitioners knew the therapeutic benefit that a food or herb or something would have on the body.
Mm. Yeah, Dr. Axis, actually, from an interview perspective, it's tough to interview you because my brain is like, I want to go so deep on nutrition with you. I want to go so deep on Chinese herbs. But then there's also this amazing mindset leadership perspective that you have. And Harry and I are both fascinated, particularly in the Growth Lab podcast that you've launched. And you've put up so much good content on mindset leadership. I know you got the degree from Johns Hopkins in leadership as well. And number one, I think that's so interesting because I think with the millions of followers that you have, you could so easily just pigeonhole yourself as the nutrition guy. And there's so much confirmation bias around like, this is why people are following me about food, medicine, etc. Why am I going to talk about mindset and leadership? But I think you really saw, look, I have a great skill set that I've earned here, and I want to talk about these things. So I think that's such a cool thing. So not just letting yourself be pigeonholed, but broaden out into these other topics that you're interested in, because you can eat all the right foods, take all the right medicine, but if you don't have that internal belief in spirituality, really without that framework, nothing else matters. So I would just love to learn, number one, what made you so interested in getting that degree? And then what kind of led you to starting the podcast, and how has that experience been for you so far?
Yeah. I'll share a few things here. And I think that, I think all of them sort of culminated in sort of what's led me to have a greater focus now on spiritual wellness and leadership and personal growth and psychology. As I was studying, looking at my mom and what helped her heal, it wasn't food alone. It was the spiritual component, that mindset component. My mom had a lot of fear in her life, a lot of anxiety, and that was causing major health issues. So we had to help her break free of that. A lot of people, and Brett, you've probably seen this, like when I took care of patients in my functional medicine clinic, if some of them, let's say inflammatory bowel disease, would go and eat gluten, boom. I mean, it was terrible. But what's was crazy to me the first few times it happened was they had something like that happen again, identical, and they'd been eating perfectly. And it's like, well, what caused that? I got in a fight with my spouse, or I had this stressful incident at work. So we know that our emotional component of our health and spiritual component, it impacts our physical body. That mind-body connection is really, really strong. And so I think I realized that. And then as I started studying Chinese medicine, I started realizing that every emotion you have causes something to happen in an organ. I don't know that I went through this with you guys. I'm trying to remember. I want to make sure I don't repeat myself. But the emotion of fear is tied to the adrenal glands. So, and we all know this, right? If you have a lot of fear, you get in a fight or flight state, your body produces cortisol, adrenaline, like we all know that. Or if a child gets really scared at night, they can wet the bed if they have a nightmare because that fear. So we know that the emotion of fear is tied to your reproductive system. Worry is tied to your upper GI. Think about, I feel like my stomach's tied in knots if we have too much, if we worry too much. Or anger is tied to the liver, causes disease there. Grief, if you have had something bad happen in your past, physical abuse, emotional abuse, regret about something, shame and guilt, and you're still living with that today, that affects your lungs and colon, which is your immune system. think about it, if you have a lot of anxiety or nervousness, boom, blood pressure goes up. So that affects the cardiovascular system. So I started realizing just over time, just how important our mindset is to our physical health. But then, Harry and Brad, I shared this with you, I think, just for a quick minute, when I saw you at Urban Market there in Nashville, Tennessee. I didn't walk for a year. So a lot of people don't know this about me. So about a year and a half ago, I'd injured my back weightlifting and hurt a disc quite a few years ago. And I'd got stem cell therapy. It's amazing. They take your own bone marrow and inject it back in, and it would adjust your stem cells. And I got like so much better after that. And I thought, well, I'm going to get it done one more time, and I think I'll be back to 100%. Now I was still deadlifting and squatting and swimming, and it was in pretty good shape, but I thought I still have this nagging issue. So I went and got stem cell done about a year and a half ago in my disc. And then something just didn't go right at the procedure. And then afterwards, I just wasn't feeling it. I felt worse and worse and worse for months. Finally, 3 months later, I woke up and I couldn't walk. Couldn't walk at all. My back was so much pain. Went in, got an MRI. They said, you have a infection in your spine. It's not only in your disc now, it's in your bone. You have osteomyelitis. You also have an abscess that's grown with an infection. And the doctor sat down with me, and the prognosis he gave, he said, best case scenario, you're going to have pain the rest of your life. And when the weather comes through, you'll know when the weather's coming through. I'm sharing his exact words. I'm like, okay. And he's like, worst case scenario, you're going to be permanently disabled. This is a year and a half ago. And I said, okay, I don't receive that, but I appreciate you, doc, sharing that. And so I decided I was going to do everything I could. Now, I ended up getting on an antibiotic for a short period of time. Now, they recommended I be on it for 3 times longer than I did. But I got on an IV for a period of time. And then in addition to that, I'd read a study about how hyperbaric chamber and other therapies help kill infections. So I got in a hyperbaric chamber for 2 hours a day, a hard chamber. I started doing red light therapy. I only ate meat and vegetables. It was the only thing I ate for months. Started doing all these things. I started getting a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. So I started finally healing over time. But this process, the infection was so severe, and your discs don't heal. There's no blood supply there almost. So it took me, I didn't walk an inch for 10 months, but it was really a full year almost before, because I had to be on a walker for a while too. So, and that was just as of, quite a few months ago. Started walking again this last May. And I say that all to say, like as I was going through that, one of the things I realized is, food is medicine's important. Lifestyle medicine's important. Mainstream medicine, it's important. But the most powerful thing for me healing, I really realized at the time, was my mindset, this sort of mindset medicine or mind medicine, because I'd felt emotions like despair and hopelessness, and I'd never felt those emotions before, I can say. Because, can you imagine, you have a doctor that tells you your best case scenario is you'll be in pain the rest of your life, and the worst case is you're permanently disabled, when I was just felt like I was in great shape, throwing my 2-year-old daughter in the air, in the pool. And then I couldn't even roll on my side. I couldn't even be in a wheelchair. The pain was so bad. Literally, I crawled to a pool. That's all I could do is crawl sometimes. And so I was in bed, the same bed, for almost a full year. And so all that being said, while I was in that situation, this has really allowed me to connect with God in a deep way. And I think also grow and create a higher level of sort of empathy and compassion for others. But I realized that if people are going to heal, the mindset piece is the most important piece. The reality is a lot of people know what to do. A lot of people know they should be eating healthier, right? A lot of people know they should be doing better. A lot of people don't do it. And I actually believe it's more because they don't have they don't know their true identity in God, and they don't have a strong enough purpose for their life. There's a study that found only 25% of people say they know what their purpose is.
Wow.
And that's not even how many people are living it out. So very few people know and are living out their purpose. So I started writing a book at the time, and the book's called Think This, Not That. And it was all about, here is what you have to think to live your best life. So I started realizing I had a lot of limiting beliefs. And here's the limit. I started going over, like, I felt like in the past, like maybe I wasn't smart enough or all kinds of things. And I started realizing this is a big reason why people don't heal or people don't live their best life, is they have so many limiting beliefs. So in the book, I really go through exactly what people need to do to create this sort of resilient mindset. I talk about people like David Goggins, Deion Sanders almost lost his entire foot. What he did when he was in the hospital. I talk about people like Jordan Rubin, many others, and go through my story. But it's a book that where if people really want to know what their true identity is, how to find their purpose, how to overcome limiting beliefs and live their big life. I'd encourage people to check it out. It's going to be in bookstores nationwide, Amazon.com. I don't mean just to plug the book, but just to say, like, this is what I did. Like, I was in the middle of this for a year. I wrote this book while I was in this situation. But I do believe that our mindset is the most important thing we need to heal and to live our best life. I think a lot of people struggle. Here's the thing. Like, I think I started off maybe mentioning this. I barely graduated high school because I had a C- grade point average. And I did so poorly in school because I had a teacher say something negative to me, and I created a limiting belief from it. And if I would have never overcome that limiting belief, we probably wouldn't be doing this interview now. I probably wouldn't have gone on to become a doctor or graduate Johns Hopkins or write some books or start Ancient Nutrition, my supplement company. And so I just want to say this for everybody watching, like, you might just be one limiting belief away from absolutely blowing the lid off your life and living your best life by far. Like, a lot of people have limiting beliefs about God. They believe that God is like a fairy in the sky versus no, like, God is a perfect father and wants the best for you. And so I think when people are able to fully embrace that, the truth, I think that it's powerful. But I really found these limiting beliefs really impact our life. And so one of my new missions really is helping people discover the truth, find their identity, find their purpose, live the best life. And that was the impetus of starting my new podcast. We called it the Growth Lab. We may actually switch it to call it the Dr. Josh Axe Show again. And but anyways, sorry, that was a long answer, but that's, it's the thing I'm most passionate about for sure.
Mm. You touched on something there. It's so powerful. You touched on something there that I think is really overlooked. Just the identity piece. Um,
Mm.
I think a lot of people struggle to find themselves and then never really spend enough time um, really identifying who they are, what they want to do in this world. So I'm curious how you've answered those questions for yourself, and how you've gone about doing that. It seems like a lot of these things
Yeah.
are on the other side of some very, very hard thing that happens to people, and usually that helps steer people in the right direction. But for people who are just trying to really ask themselves the tough questions going into 2024, maybe have a fresh new start, how have you answered those questions for yourself?
Yeah. And this is something I cover in the book because I do think for people, it is absolutely critical that they discover their identity and who they are. But here's the thing. There's a lot of psychologists that complicate identity. By the way, I'm working on a psychology degree right now because it's a passion I have. But there's three things that really impact your identity: your community and people in your life, your roles and your responsibilities. This is how you discover your identity. And the identity you want to build is the identity that most powerfully allows you to use your greatest gifts to impact the world for the greatest good. So that's a lot of words, but and think about it like this, okay? So like, our goal should all be to um, grow in character and in skill. So if you take those talents God's given you, maybe it's being a podcaster like this, right? So you should say to yourself, God, it's like the parable of the talents. If you read the Bible, like, one person has one talent, they go and bury it, and another person has two, and they double it, and the other person has five, they double it, and God goes to the person with one and says, "You evil and wicked servant," and the people that go and use their talents for the greatest good, He says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Same thing. So it's like, what is your gift and skill? Do everything you can to be the best in the world at that thing. And then do it with the highest level of character. Because if you're just the best in the world at something, but you use it for evil, if you're a Bill Gates, for instance, or a Klaus Schwab, or a George Soros, or a Hitler, you're only destroying society. Versus if you're a Michelangelo, a Mother Teresa. So my point there is that so whatever identity is going to help you do that greatest good. And in the Aristotle always used an archery term, okay? And he said that's what you should be aiming for, is that kind of middle between your optimizing your life to where you're using your greatest skill with the greatest amount of character. And if you do that, you're going to live your best life possible. So now going back to identity, now how do you do that? How do you find that target and shoot for that and grow character the greatest and grow your skill the greatest? Well, again, it's your community, it's your roles and responsibilities. Let me give you an example as a father. Okay. You want to attach the greatest level of meaning and significance to your roles that you possibly can. So my role as a dad, here is the least meaningful. As a father, my role is simply to, and as a tied to it responsibility, is to impregnate a female. Boom, done. That's it. Okay. That's obviously pretty low. Okay. And actually kind of even, anyway, it's very low. Okay. Let's go quite a step up from this. This is more of a traditional identity with this as well, is that my goal is to, with traditional identity, my goal is to provide for my family financially. That's a lot better. I'm going to be there. I'm going to stick around. I'm going to show up. I'm going to provide for my family. Boom. That is so much more meaningful that you feel like you're responsible for providing for other human beings and meeting their needs. Okay, that's better. But let's go to a higher level of identity. Okay, my identity as a father is to, and by the way, my identity is impacted. First, I have somebody that's impacted me. So that father that was at the bottom, maybe his father left him, and so he just, so that community, that person in his life left him. So that's who he was connected to, is nobody. Maybe that other person in the middle, their father, their community says, well, that's the role that you need to play, is as a, providing for your family. But the highest level of a father is, no, I'm here to create kids that are like Christ. I'm here to create kids where, like my daughter, I have a 3-year-old right now. I'm trying to find, what is she great at? Okay, she's a great swimmer. Okay, so I'm going to do everything I can to help her be a better swimmer. I'm going to do everything I can in her character. Arwen, you're kind, you're generous, you're loving. So my goal as a father is to realize that my daughter is not only born for now, she's going to live for eternity. And then she's going to have kids, and they're going to have kids, and they're going to have kids. So as a father, I'm responsible for this individual and maybe thousands and thousands of others in the future, and their character and their skill by what I pass down to my daughter. And so all that being said, I think that if you want to live a meaningful life and you want to be driven every single day, know your true identity. If your identity is that, hey, I'm a child of God, I'm made in the image of God, I got a plan and purpose for my life, there is no one like me, I'm unique on this entire planet, and my role is as a father to be the best father ever and to help my kids live and grow. I'm to be the best husband ever in order to help my wife's dreams come true and be iron sharpens iron. As a boss, to not only just pay my employees, but to help them grow and disciple them to fulfill their, greatest dreams and help them grow in their character and skill. If that's my identity, I am now a powerful person. And so I think for identity, a lot of times people kind of downplay how meaningful their life is. It's nihilism. It's, well, it doesn't really matter if I do this or not. It doesn't matter if I spend hours on social media or doing this or this, versus, no, I know every single thing I do in this world has eternal impact. And so I think that that's a big part of developing the right type of identity.
It's beautifully said. It reminds me a lot of Jordan Peterson's exercise of make a list of all the right things that you should be doing and imagine how that's going to impact your life in 10 years' time. And then also make a list of all the wrong things that you're doing that you know are wrong and how you think you'll turn out in 10 years. And it's a really powerful exercise. And his point is actually like the happiness that you're looking for is on the other side of bearing more responsibility and doing the right things. So I'm curious, Dr. Axe, how do you think about having that balance of putting as much meaning into everything you're doing, whether it's like a dad, a business owner, a partner, et cetera, while also not putting like too much crippling pressure on yourself at the same time?
Yeah, I love this question. So I think there's a beautiful blend of giving and receiving. I think for myself, here's how I think about God. Okay, and by the way, I know I've talked a lot. You guys may not get as much spirituality as I talk about, but I'm a very spiritual person. So the way that I think about God is I first think about myself as a dad and how much I love my daughter, and realize that God is infinitely more loving and perfect than I am, and as how He is a father to me. So when I look at my daughter Arwen right now, and I have another daughter, Aylin, but when I look at my daughters, I like the thing that means the most, like if I think about what do I think perfection is, a great life for Arwen, I don't think it's her working at 80 hours a week. I don't think it's her slaving away all single day, every day. What I think a great life for her is seeing her grow in her gifts, but grow in her character. Like if I see Arwen and she's 20 years old and I see, let's say she's playing sports one day and she's playing soccer and she knocks someone over, she goes and picks them back up. She puts her arm around people. She says, "Hey, you're built for more than that." She's an encourager. She's a like that's what I want for my daughter. Like actually, I don't really care what my daughter accomplishes. I care who she becomes. I don't think she needs to be doing stuff constantly all the time just to meet the needs of others, even be a Mother Teresa. I care more about who she becomes. And I think if I focus on her becoming the right type of person, the right actions will flow. Like I don't act like everything depends on me. I act like I can do my best in the time given, and then I really rely on God to do the rest. And so I don't think that this is sort of a solo act. So all that being said, I think that if you are receiving love from God and understanding what God wants for you before you take action, like God wants you to grow in your skill, He wants you to have great character, but He wants you to become more like Him and like Jesus. I think if you can embrace that and understand that, maybe that takes a little bit of pressure off, because God wants you to be. Now listen, somebody could turn this into a prosperity gospel. Like I think God wants us to be blessed and more like Him, and that's number one. And I think that God wants you to have a roof over your head. I think God wants you to be well fed. I think God wants all those things. But I think that more than that, He wants you to be like Him. More than anything. And so that's the And so sometimes I think He allows us to go through things. And sorry, this could be a much longer discussion. I just started realizing this is kind of like there's a lot of theological sort of roads here. All that being said, I think that my balance is understanding, thinking about like yourself as a child. What does your perfect dad or perfect mom want for you in your life? How should it look? And that's maybe what you try and create.
Mm. Yeah. Dr. Alex, one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking just on this topic of leadership and really like kind of just the topic of like tapping into spirituality is finding really good spiritual leaders and finding mentorship.
Yeah.
And I know you have a really good relationship with Jordan Rubin, and he's someone who Brett and I really look up to and admire and, think of as a mentor. I'm just curious, kind of what traits do you seek out when you're looking for mentorship? Like for me, the past year has been so impactful because I've kind of realized or like re-acknowledged the fact of just the straight up importance of having really strong, men in my life, whether they're mentees or peers or mentors, having that dynamic of people across a completely different different dimensions. But just having those people in your life who you can pour into, who people can pour into you, it's just so important. So I'm curious how you think about that, seeking out mentors and people to really model your life after.
Yeah, my biggest life lesson is we become who we surround ourselves with and who we expose ourselves to. I mean, I think anything that I've been blessed to have in life or any success I've had in life was because I had a mentor or somebody around me who really helped me. And Jordan Rubin is a great example of this. Jordan is such an incredible. I mean, it's so crazy. I look back at like I read The Maker's Diet when my mom was going through cancer. And it really helped us sort of navigate some of the diet and some of the things we were going to do with her. And then years later, I had an opportunity to meet Jordan, and he wrote an endorsement for my first book. And then we became, best friends. And then we started Ancient Nutrition together, and so a number of things. And so, Jordan was a friend, but also he's definitely mentored me in some great ways. So I've been blessed to know Jordan. I think that I think first, and going back to mentorship, I do think that it's the fastest way to become someone better. I think our goal should not be to accomplish things. It should be becoming. Like most of us have a to-do list. We should have a becoming list, more generous, kind, wise, those sort of things. What I look for, let's start with that. What I look for is my highest criteria actually probably is wisdom is very high on my list. Somebody who's wise. They know how to make good decisions and choices in life, because we all have decisions and choices. And if you make a right decision or a wrong decision, it can impact your entire life. I mean, think about like certain decisions you made. You thought I was going to move here or move here. Wow. So so a lot of that's wisdom. And so I look for wisdom. And the next thing would be integrity. Somebody that just their general encompassing most of their character. They tell the truth. They're honest. They're not hiding things. They are, and they have good character. So I think wisdom and integrity are two things that I really, really look for. And then there are things that just kind of are natural and personal. I mean, I like people that are really, they want to do big things, right? They're big thinkers, want to be world changers. And so that doesn't have to be everybody's, but that's one that I try and tend to look for. So those are some of those things. And then I just look out in the world and I say, who is doing those things? And what I tend to write down is who are the people that I can find in my personal life who may not be, a billionaire, but maybe they are, or maybe they haven't built a really successful business, but they encompass those things. Okay. So, and maybe, well, they probably have built a successful business, but all that being said, I write down who are those people in my town, in my city. So for myself, I'll just give an example. Like I try and meet with a guy named Michael Hyatt a few times a year. There's another guy in my city, Donald Miller. And I don't see them all the time. I probably see them maybe twice a year, but those are guys I try and regularly connect with. And then I have other guys that are maybe just a few years older than me, like Jordan Rubin or Gabe Lyons and some of those sort of people that I try and connect with more often. And then I have those mentors who are virtual. Jordan Peterson is probably my first part of my business career was Jordan Peterson. I'm sorry, was John Maxwell. I probably read 30 John Maxwell books. I mean, I did a lot of John Maxwell. And then the last probably 5 years or so has been probably Jordan Peterson. I've learned so much from him. And then I tend to have different categories of mentors. I also have spiritual mentors. I've been blessed to know, I love following Tim Keller. Now he passed away last year, but I love Tim Keller's stuff. There's a guy, Bill Johnson, who I love as well. There is, there's a Catholic priest or bishop. I love Bishop Barron, who's fantastic. So anyways, I love following a lot of these sort of spiritual leaders as well. But I tend to have my more spiritual and more business sort of leaders that I tend to follow in those two camps. And then what I do is I just really, watch everything they do, read everything they do and they're putting out there. And then, I'll probably maybe try to attend some of their events. But I guess that's how, now let me tell you a quick story too. So when I first moved to Nashville, I heard Dave Ramsey on the radio. And I heard him on there and I thought, I can do what he does. And so, but I'll do it for health. And so I started a radio show, eventually became a 3-hour show, call-in show, got syndicated for a time. We were in five cities. And then I realized podcasting and YouTubing, and it's more of the future. So, but anyways, I heard Dave. And so I went up and I signed up. I went to Dave. He had this big seminar, leadership seminar. I went to it. And at the end, I said, I had an opportunity to just meet Dave for just a minute. And I said, Dave, hey, thanks so much. And I said, hey, I would be honored. Is there any way that I could be mentored by you? And he said, Josh, I'm so honored you asked, but I just don't have the time. So I really got denied there. But then I went home after that and I wasn't too discouraged. I'm like, man, that would have been great. But I thought, well, I'm going to do everything I can to still learn from Dave. And I am going to just pray that God would send me the right mentor. And I started praying. And probably 6 months later, I met Jordan Rubin, and he became, again, a mentor early on and now a close friend and even a business partner. But I would say write down those people you want to learn from. Write down those character qualities of those people. Write down the people both virtually and in person you can go and connect with, and then be prayerful about it. But that's what I would suggest.
It's cool to hear the Dave Ramsey story and some of the radio experience early on, because I think one of the things that sticks out about you is it's one thing to be able to have an interview style show and ask good questions and do a podcast, but it's a whole other skill set to put a camera on yourself and just be able to speak into the microphone about a topic at length. So more of just a general question. I'm just curious how you've refined that speaking ability, because I think in full transparency, that's something Harry and I admire a lot about you. And it's something we would love to develop ourselves heading into 2024 and beyond.
So here's what I would say. I need to get better at speaking. I have not. In fact, that's something I'm going to try and do this next year. Everything you see, this is just me being conversational and talking naturally. Like I probably need to go. I know I do, because I've seen other people who really are good on stage, who are probably more more precise than I am on stage and speaking and that sort of thing. So one thing, just know if you're watching this, I definitely have a lot to improve in terms of just generally speaking. What I have done probably more than a lot of other people is I've been really dedicated to focusing on trying to master the best I can certain topics. And I do more of I'll call it a sort of a full immersion technique. And this is something I read a book. Actually, the book I first read about it in was either a John Maxwell book or a book that inspired him, which was called Spiritual Leadership by Oswald Sanders. And basically, the book it is the spiritual leadership book, and it basically says this: if you want to learn something, fully submerge yourself in it. You know, when I was early on in my career, and by the way, I'm not when I say this, I'm not acting like I'm known all over the place or anything like that. Maybe health food stores, okay, but not all over the place. But when I started off my career, I was known as the real. Somebody like some people would say this sometimes. Oh, you're the real food guy, because I just started talking a lot about eating real food or food is medicine. And then I came up with a program called the Secret Detox Program. So people are like, oh, you're the detox doc. Well, then later on, somebody started saying, I started this program called Healing Leaky Gut. So then people said, oh, you're the leaky gut guy. Okay. And then I did an essential oil course, really dove into that. And people said, oh, you're the essential oil guy. And then it was the keto guy. And then it was the collagen, ancient nutrition guy. All that being said, what the reason that happened, I think, was because I was able to go and know a lot about topics and understand, not just this happens a lot, by the way. And by the way, this is not trying to be negative about anyone in particular. One of the things I found, because I've interviewed a lot of people, a lot of times people memorize some facts and a few of them. And then if you ask things that go deeper and deeper and deeper, they can't answer anything beyond a few of the things they memorize. And so one of the things I've tried to do in my life is really be deep and go really deep on certain topics. So I'll give you an example of this. This next few years, I'm going to really dedicate myself to really learning psychology in depth. I'll study Carl Jung and Abraham Maslow and all of those guys. And I'm going to go and even take college courses and do that all. And I will take the next 3 years and I will probably I'll read a book a month on psychology. When I read the book, I'll highlight and take notes on that book. I'll then write those notes out or type those out, and then I'll put those into a PowerPoint presentation. So 3 years from now, I will have read 36 books on psychology and have 36 presentations on those and feel like I will really, really know the field of psychology very well. My point with that is that, sorry, but what I would say is, I think pick a topic, try and read one book a month on that topic and take some notes and maybe even create, and it doesn't have to be 12, maybe it's just a few presentations on it. And if you do that, man, for me, I feel like I'm able to communicate pretty effectively because I've just gone really deep on topics. And I guess I understand the principles of things and how they work. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I do think trying to master not feeling like you need to master everything at once. No, just pick a niche or an area or a topic and go really deep on that and being able to present on that. To me, that's something I think that allows you to just pull out any time and not, and I think if you can combine that with just good speaking, which there are people that know better of this that do a better job of this than I do. But I think mixing stories with science. So stories with those statistics and the science, I think really having a beautiful blend of those two. And I think also when I try and communicate, I try and do this. I try and say, okay, we're here. Most of the audience is here. I'm going to try and get them here to take this one action or understand this one single thing by the end of the interview. And I do try and do that.
Dr. Axe, I think it's super timely advice. And in full transparency, you actually might not know this, but the Meat Mafia brand was actually started on Twitter. And it was started because Harry and I had done years of different experimentation with paleo, carnivore, keto, getting me off of some of these autoimmune drugs. And then we did an Ironman together. So did this really hard physical pursuit together. And then we said, look, we're so passionate about this and know it works so well. Let's just start telling some of these stories about the food system and be able to give data and statistics and let people really understand what's going on and give people very actionable advice for how they can improve their own health. So we were literally pouring in hundreds, if not thousands of hours worth of research to write a lot of this content. And I actually noticed our earlier podcast about 2 years ago, we were actually I think we were able to go deeper on certain topics around like regenerative agriculture, the science behind meat and animal products than we are now, just because the businesses have scaled so much that that's
Yeah.
been taking so much of our time. But everything comes from us doing that research and being super well researched. So that's actually a challenge we have for ourselves in 2024 is how do we go as deep as possible? So it's not just this very linear surface level talk track. Because if we want to make this stuff mainstream, we can't just be the informed consumer. You have to be able to go a level deeper. So I think that's really good advice. And it's very timely because we've been thinking about this for like the last month or so.
Yeah, yeah. It's always, I mean, it's a balance, right? Of being able to build a thriving business, which you guys have done such a great job of, but also bring people this incredible message of health and healing. I've been so impressed as I've talked to Jordan Rubin just about, you guys, the amazing thing you've created, the success you've had so far, and obviously you guys are doing something that's really unique to drive build up just an amazing audience you have. They're listening to this podcast now and the results people are getting. And so bravo to you guys on what you've already been able to do. But I do think it's, in the busy world, it's hard to go deep, but I think that's something that makes it different. I think with guests too, another thing, I mean, Joe Rogan's one of the best of this, asking. One of the things I'm going to try and do better on my podcast, and I'm doing a lot more of now, is talking about what's relevant today. Talking about really real time topics. I think is something else I'm aware that because in the past most podcasts they would never do that. They just talked about, and now maybe news talk, but outside of that. But today that's what I see most of the top podcasts doing for sure.
Yeah, yeah, keeping it relevant is something that I think we're going to try to incorporate a bit with our stuff too. But Dr. X, this has been awesome. I think our audience is going to absolutely love this, and we just really appreciate you coming on and all the work you've done over the past decades in terms of getting people healthier. You've had a huge impact on Brett and myself, and just really, really appreciative of your time today. So thank you.
Yeah, well, hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's a real honor to be on here. And again, I love what you guys are doing. Excited to be, excited to be a part of it in this little way. So, thanks.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Dr. Axe.